Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 356 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our third book is called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. And that is on Amazon. Go and pick up that book right now. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there's nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, there are no fraternities at Harvard, but they do quite a bit of allegiance to the dorm that they're all living in. And they are quite competitive in suggesting that their dorm is better than any other on campus. Maybe it's the great food that they have in their particular dorm, or the stellar gym that they really like in another dorm, or maybe it's just they have the best people. I don't know. I think the debate of the best dorm will continue for many generations to come at Harvard, and it all depends on who you speak to. Speaking of Harvard, let's meet our next guest. Dr. Andrew Hahn is a licensed clinical psychologist. He received his AB magna cum laude in social studies and psychology from Harvard University and his doctorate in clinical psychology from Hahn University. He is certified by Helen Palmer to teach the Enneagram, and he has also been a faculty member in the graduate counseling programs at Lesley University and also Northeastern University. While Dr. Hahn's strong foundation and significant experience in traditional psychology has served his clients well, he has this untiring in his effort to better understand what is going on for people, so that way he could better help them to live more contented and healthier lives. This calling for greater understanding, as well as certain experiences which he could not fully comprehend within the confines of traditional Western paradigms, that led him on a search for answers that opened him up to the worlds of Buddhist and Eastern psychology, mystery trainings in depth, archetypal and spiritual psychology. In 1997, after several years of witnessing the power of this work, Dr. Hahn developed the life-centered therapy training program for those who want to facilitate and or teach this process. Today, Dr. Hahn has a private practice. He speaks, teaches, and leads trainings and healing groups internationally, and continues his effort to better understand what is going on for people, so that way he can better help them live more contented and healthier lives. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hahn.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure. And if your wonderful audience had enough attention span to hang in there for that whole introduction, we're in good shape. What can I say?
Listen, I'm sure they are hanging in there with you. I'm sure they can't wait to hear more. I mean, your background is just really fascinating to me. I mean, of course, you decided on Harvard University for your undergraduate experience. I have to tell you, I toured that campus this summer with my kids, and I absolutely loved it. My wife also really liked it, but I think my kids were looking for something a little bit more modern. And I told them, you know what, you guys totally missed the point. Let's get out of here. What made you decide that Harvard was the right place for you?
There's a long and quick answer, I'd say, but the quick answer is that the diversity of the place is so amazing. So my college roommate was from a little place in the Azores, and in my dormitory were people from small towns in Africa, and the diversity was remarkable. And I think the thing about Harvard, if anything distinguishes it, which is the hardest thing about Harvard, to be perfectly honest, when I was going there, was getting into it. But because it was not, one of the reasons I went there was I didn't think it'd be that hard a school once you got into it, which I think is actually fairly true, as opposed to smaller colleges where you get much more intensive undergraduate education. Whereas Harvard is more, for me, when I was there in the 70s, it was more a place you lived, and one of the things you happened to do was go to classes. And that all, of course, changed around 1980. But when I was there in the late 70s, it was still the 60s, and it was really a lot of fun. And the other thing about Harvard, and then I'll be quiet about Harvard, is there's such a history there that you have to say, it really, every college makes you think about who you are and your identity. But Harvard, when you have this like tradition of hundreds of years and everybody who went there, and you say, what am I doing here? I think it just takes what's for every college students and makes it a little bit more. And that was interesting.
I know for sure. If I mean, not that my grades were good enough to get in. My kids, they have the grades to get in, but my grades definitely weren't. I think I would just have imposter syndrome for all 4 years that I was there. I mean, what am I doing here is exactly the question I would be asking on a daily basis.
Well, I think that's everybody who goes to Harvard has imposter syndrome. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter how good your grades are. It's
right.
like, because, what are we doing here? But
What are
we're
we
here.
doing
So
here?
you have
Yeah.
to figure out what the heck you're doing here. You know,
And it's interesting too because you're a licensed clinical psychologist and the training you offer, they're really based on the Enneagram, which I think is fantastic. Why is the Enneagram, why is that framework the one that you decide to work in?
well, my training actually is the Enneagram is part of our training. Life-centered therapy is a much broader framework than the Enneagram. But I'll tell you why I love the Enneagram. The Enneagram is the best tool I know for understanding ourselves and others from the inside out, and what really makes people, what really motivates them. And it's a very simple system to learn in some ways, because it basically says there are 9 kinds of people and really only 3 kinds of people with 3 variations. But if you don't understand how we're different from other people, you'd say, what the heck is going on with them? But as soon as you say, oh my goodness, like they have a whole different way of making sense of things. And if I could step into that, not from projecting onto them and thinking they were nuts, but saying, oh my goodness, they're just like their attention goes to totally different things. And what motivates them is totally different. And I could understand that. And then, of course, our relationships could improve. But it also tells us, which is a really remarkable thing about why we're stuck in our perspective and why we can't step outside of it, because it says our perspective is based in a fear. So like if I'm at Harvard and a lot of people at Harvard are called performers and they say succeed, I succeed, therefore I am, or I do, therefore I am. Well, why do they compulsively need to succeed compulsively? So they never really experience success. It's because they're afraid of I'm a failure or I do nothing. So ironically, of course, if you could like fully accept I'm a failure, then you could fully accept I'm a succeeder.
Right.
And if you can't, you never get to experience success because you're just trying not to fail.
Mhm.
So the beauty of this thing is it tells you what you're most afraid to experience about yourself, and then it gives you a way to, be in a different relationship with your fear. And in terms of understanding other people and in understanding relationships, it's amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really didn't run into the Enneagram until I was an adult and a therapist pulled it out and we started talking. I'm sure it's not going to surprise you to know that I'm the performer as well. And, it really does help you to understand relationships. I think it's really, really critical to understand what motivates people and even for yourself to understand, okay, if you are the performer, this is kind of what the basement looks like for the performer. So that way you're aware of that and you can recognize when you're sitting in the basement, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I had a performer who came to me for therapy once, and this man he was more successful. I mean, a multi millionaire,
Yeah.
and each of his wife was more beautiful than the last one, but he was drinking. So he was telling me all about this, and I said, "Tell me, what's it like to be a failure?" And he said, "No one's ever said that to me." I said, "Okay, so tell me I'm wrong." He said, "You're not wrong. I spent my whole life trying to prove I wasn't a failure."
That's right.
And that's when we could start working on how his drinking was a way not to have to experience being a failure, but it of course invited him into being a failure because the things we do to protect ourselves also invite us into the things we're afraid to experience, which
That's
is,
right.
you know,
Yeah, it's just fascinating work. So I definitely, to our audience, if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, study that. I think it's really fantastic. Figure out, where you're at, and if you're in a relationship, where that person is at. And I think it will really help you quite a bit. And obviously, working with a professional, I can't say enough good things to kind of explore that. And you offer this life-centered therapy training. Talk to our audience about what a client would get from this training with you.
they get freedom from suffering. And what suffering means is anything that makes you feel anxious or makes you comparative or makes you judgmental. So pain isn't the problem, it's people's judgmentalism that's the problem. And so, ironically, of course, when you can take care of your judgmentalism, often the things that are the symptoms of your judgmentalism, which are really trauma and being stuck, you get unstuck and then you're free. And then when you're free, it's like, if you can say yes to everything, right? If you can do that, Greek, if you're, if you think about Christ as an exemplar, right? When Jesus is there, he's saying, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" Right? He's feeling judgmental and anxious and everything. But when he, you know, um, has a revelation, he says, they can't do anything to me. They could kill my body, but they can't do anything to me. And I just give my soul over to you, my Father. So it's like his whole relationship changes. And what I'd say is that's what we're all invited into. So if we could be in a whole different relationship with the things we're most anxious about, uh, we're free. And it's very easy to know how to do that. So, I mean, what people come to me because they have all kinds of symptoms. They have anxiety, they have depression, they have, they have mindset problems, they try to work in school and then something got them stuck. And if I one thing I'd say to your audience, whenever you're stuck, there's always a sensation that is the exact equivalent of the stuckness. So if Michael, if you said, like, I'm feeling anxious because I have a test and God forbid I might fail, failure is not an option, but I think I'm going to, and then, the whole world's going to, like look at me and like laugh. I'd say, Michael, when you're feeling that way, what happens in the body? And let's suppose you said, my chest is tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say something funny to you, Michael. I'm going to say, Michael, you're not anxious. Someone whose name is chest is tight is anxious. Your little toe is just fine. Now, here's the key. If you could choose to become tight chest, you no longer unconsciously identify with it. You consciously identify with the one who's choosing to be it and bearing witness to it, in the same way that an actor would be playing a role in a play or a movie, or if you were reading and really immersed in a novel, but you would know you weren't the character in the novel even if you wrote the novel. And the way to get out of hell of anxiety is to feel it in the body, to notice the sensation, to bring all your attention there and just say, tight chest, what have you come to share about anxiety? And then say whatever comes to you, anything you're feeling, anything you're imagining, anything you're remembering. And suddenly, instead of being the one who's anxious, you'll be the one who's there with the one who's anxious. You'll be the one who says, I accept you. I'm bearing witness to you. I hold you, but I'm not you. And I guarantee you, if you're a college student and all you did was that, your anxiety would get better than if you went to most therapy, because talking about it doesn't help, but letting it share helps a lot. So
Really powerful stuff. Yeah, I don't know that a lot of people have really thought about it that way. And so it's fascinating for me. You're also the author of the book, and it's called The 1 Hour Miracle. What
yes,
motivated you to write this particular book?
yes, here it is, the 1 hour miracle. You can see it. What motivated me and my co-author to write this book is that we have this framework that has gotten really extraordinary results, and we see people suffering, and we wanted them not to suffer as much. We have a mission, and I'm passionate. Every time I sit with people and they have profound anxiety, nothing's been touching it, and it's been not responsive to treatment, and it can go away sometimes in an hour. When they've been in therapy for years, spending hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars, and under the right circumstances, if all they did was do what I said, they might get results in an hour that they may not have gotten in months of doing therapy, or may never have gotten. So we wanted people to know, because there's a lot of suffering in the world. I mean, on personal levels and on collective levels, there's just a lot of trauma and a lot of suffering, and we think we have a whole framework and a way to be free of it, and be free of the anxiety that comes with it. So that's what the book.
I mean, your methodology, I think, is very different than what I would traditionally hear from a Western doctor. I mean, the book advocates for really a paradigm shift in the field. And it's kind of what I was hinting at earlier. I think, it invites us to think about our suffering not in terms of drives or childhood experiences. I hear ACEs like all the time here, or even interpersonal relations, which I think is the traditional way of looking at suffering. So can you be like really detailed in terms of how you think about suffering?
Sure. I think of suffering is not remembering who we are.
Mm.
So the best way I can explain it is whenever you identify with anything, you're in a place of limitation. So what I said to you before about if you're the one who chooses to become something, right? In this case, I've said a body sensation, and then says, I'm here with you and I'm bearing witness to you and I accept you, which is all it wants ever, because all want is self-acceptance, but I'm not you, right? And suddenly you say, if you say, I am anxious, right? You'll identify with being anxious. But if you say, I'm the one who's choosing to experience being anxious, but I'm not the one who's anxious. So what you do is you put together kind of an awareness practice with a kind of mindfulness and a focusing in the body and knowing that the body, that every sensation in the body has a story to share. It's like, and it's a story of stuckness. And when you're in a different relationship with it, it just goes away and it goes back into its pure form. And suddenly tight chest isn't there anymore. It's gone from being matter to being energy, and you just won't notice it anymore. It will become remembered as opposed to dismembered. And the point of life is to become remembered, to ultimately remember who we truly are, which is everything. And I can explain to you very briefly what I mean. We have trillions of cells, right? Each one on the surface is different. Everyone is different. Each one is differentiated. Most of us are, but underneath it, there's a template called DNA. And in the DNA, everything is there, right? And so what I'd say is when we just identify with the surface of things, I think the mystical idea is that like we're cells in a body of a living being that's evolving called life. And our work is to get to a place where we know that we're the template. Because when you're the template, it's like you are everything simultaneously. It's why you can take one cell and create clone Dolly the sheep, because everything that has ever happened, is happening, and potentially could happen is who you fundamentally are. And if you knew that, then you could be the exterior without identifying with it. And then you could truly play your role, because each of us has this differentiated role, because on the surface, we're all different. But we wouldn't identify with it. We would just say that's our role to play. And our role might be to get crucified. Our role might be to be a billionaire. Our role might be anything. But we would just say yes, because we wouldn't be identified with it. And then we could truly live it. And that's the whole idea here. And the reason people forget is trauma. And trauma just means there's something that can't be handled. So when you can handle everything, you're free to be whatever life's inviting you into without anxiety or without judgmentalism. And that's the invitation here, is to remember that who we fundamentally are is everything. So when we say love thy neighbor as thyself, if you were the template, loving thy neighbor as thyself is I am my neighbor. And my neighbor is me. And I'm everything, and everything is who I am, because we're all the same life force. And that's what we forget. And then we think, I'm Michael. Really, you're not Michael. You're someone who's experiencing Michaeling, but you're not Michael. You're not really Michael. And I'm not really Andy. So when I think I'm Andy, then I have a limitation because I don't think I'm Michael. And then I can do terrible things to Michael because I say he's not me, but he is me. And we all can love each other,
Mm-hmm. This is really interesting stuff. I mean, now I think I understand the idea behind life-centered therapy really well. But the college students right now who are listening, I tell you what, they've got anxiety, they've got depression. Obviously, I think the pandemic certainly exacerbated the issue, but it's still there. So can you give our audience 5 steps to get rid of that anxiety and walk us through that?
Sure. The first step, which anyone can do for themselves in a limited way, is find what it is that you're most stuck about, right? And the way you do that is you say, there's something that I really like. If I could really live the life I want to be living, what would I be doing right now? But something's keeping me from doing it. So that's the first step, is to find out what you're really stuck about, okay? Now, you can just start with whatever you think you're stuck about, and that will eventually get you there. I can do it faster because I can find the thing you think you're stuck about may not be it at all. It may be a symptom of something deeper, but at least you got a starting place, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first step. The second step is, do you have to do something as a precondition to working on that thing. So sometimes in order to work on the thing you're stuck about, there's like a foundation underneath it. And we explain all this in the book. The third thing is kind of a preparation. It's like you're saying, like, I'm going to kind of get information about where it originated, because everything after where it originates is an echo, right? If a motorcycle backfires and you have a panic attack, it's probably not because the motorcycle backfired, right? But it may be that, even for your college students, some of them are old enough that they may have been soldiers in a war, right? And they come back and bombs went off near them, and so they get stuck in that war. And so the motorcycle backfires and they have a panic attack. But it wouldn't help me if I just worked on motorcycles backfire. I'd have to know that that was a line to a bomb going off, and I'd have to know where it originated, because everything after that would just be an echo, and working on the echo isn't as powerful as working on the point of origin. So you want to get the point of origin, because that takes care of everything that's on the line. And then you have to find out, does whoever it is that's stuck, whether it's you 20 years ago, whoever you are, do they need something other than just sharing their story while you listen to it, which is an amazing thing. And if they need something, it could be anything, right? It could be like, saying a prayer. It could be doing acupressure. There's hundreds of things that they may need if sharing their story isn't enough. Although I will tell you, sharing the story is the most powerful thing. So that's the third step. It's sort of like preparing for a journey. The fourth step is taking a journey, right? So how do you take the journey? You find a sensation and you say, I'm going to choose to become that sensation from the inside out. So my name is no longer Michael, right? It's heart pounding fast, or tight throat, or headache, or pain in little toe, or buzzing over my head, whatever it is. So you're going to choose to become the sensation, and then you're going to like share whatever comes to you. And it might be like you'll hear things like you're reading a novel. It might be you'll see things like you're watching a movie. If you're really what's called kinesthetic and you sense things, you might even act out the story, but it won't matter anymore, because you'll know you're like an actor who's become a role in a play, even if you're screaming on my floor because a bomb is going off, but you've chosen to become the sensation, so you no longer identify with it. So, and then you give it the fourth, and then if they need something else other than just sharing their story, the end of the fourth step is you give them whatever there is, and then you see if something's different. And the way you'll know right away that something's different is that discomfort, right? Heart pounding faster, tight chest, or closing up throat will just go away. Because when you're with it and you say, I accept you, it goes back into its pure form, and it's no longer matter like E equals MC squared. It turns back into energy, and then it just isn't there anymore. And then the last step is taking it home. So there are lessons to learn. And is there anything you need to do in an ongoing way to deepen whatever has happened to you? And I ask a lot of questions. And then I say, do you want a different life? And that's the end of the fifth step. If you say, yeah, I want a different life, then you just choose to have a different life, because you're not stuck anymore. You have a choice. That's the 5 steps.
Wow, that's just fascinating. I mean, when I think about my own life, I had chronic lower back pain for many, many years that nobody could explain. I went to physical therapy. I went to chiropractors, massage. I mean, you name it, I tried it. Nobody could figure it out. I think it was probably stress related at the time, and I've made some life changes since then. But I mean, so you believe that somebody listening right now, that they can heal unexplainable chronic pain essentially just by changing their mind. Is that right?
uh, by more than changing their mind, changing their whole experience, by being in a different relationship with it, which changes your mind, it changes your heart, it changes your body. You want to hear a quick story about chronic pain?
Sure.
Lots of them. We had a woman who came in. She had major depression, right? We did this at a conference.
Mhm.
She had major depression. Here's how she described it: I'm weighed down, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, I can't move. That's how she described it. She had tried everything for it,
Mhm.
nothing was working.
Right.
Okay, I find out in a way that I describe in the book. I ask people's souls questions. And when you're in alignment with life, you get stronger. So I could say, is that the most important thing to work on? If I pressed on your arm, if your arm stays strong, the answer is yes. If it goes down, the answer is no. So I find out that's not the most important thing to work on. So then she starts having a panic attack in front of 125 people. And she says, I know these people are going to kill me. I know it's crazy. And she took medication for that. She tried medication for her depression too. Nothing was touching it. And she could get in front of crowds, but she wasn't taking her medication. Then she literally started to hyperventilate and have a panic attack in front of 125 people and said, these people are going to kill me. She said, I know it can't be true. Okay. So I found out that's not what we have to work on either. So I found what we had to work on was a traumatic death. How I find that would take longer to describe than I can tell you here. But she was stuck in a story around a traumatic death. And some part of her never actually completed it. So there was a part of her that was experiencing, I want to die. When we had her focus on the part that was experiencing, I want to die, I said, what's happening in your body? And she said, I'm having excruciating neck pain. So I said, you're going to become neck pain. She had a whole story about her neck pain, but she had also gone all over the place to try to get, help for her neck pain. Nothing was touching her neck pain. And they said, you shouldn't be having it. She'd been having it for years. And they said, it doesn't make sense. It's irrational that this should, even though you had whiplash, you shouldn't be having the neck pain because it wasn't physical. Her accident was actually unconscious reenactment of what's about to be told to you, which is she starts violently wrenching her neck. If people can see me, she starts violently wrenching her neck like this. And she says, oh my God, there's a guillotine coming down on my head. And she says, I'm weighed down. I'm helpless. I'm hopeless. She's screaming all of this. I can't move. I'm in front of a whole group of people. They're screaming bloody murder at me. And I'm vowing never be in front of a whole group of people again. The only thing she can move is her neck, and she's violently wrenching it. And so she plays that out unconsciously by creating a whiplash story in this lifetime, right? And she's screaming at God and saying, like, why hast thou forsaken me? I was a good Christian, and I will never believe in you again. 4 problems, right? Major depression, panic attacks in front of crowds, chronic neck pain, and alienation from God, and nothing was touching any of them. So she says, you know what she says at the end of that? She says, I must have died. So we say, we know what your problem is. You didn't know you had died. Why? Because you were so afraid of that pain, the emotional and the physical pain of what was going to happen, that you kind of left your body before you actually died. And if you leave your body, which it's called dissociation, or it's called in a different world, it's called lost soul parts. If you leave your body and then your body gets killed, you have a problem, which is like, it's like you leave home and then you go home, there's no home left. So you're stuck here kind of like a ghost. So I said, okay, here's your problem. The problem is you didn't know you had died. So now we know what the problem is. So what we're going to do is we're going to inform that part that it died. The way we're going to do that is very simple. We're going to have you, the one who's witnessing it, call all the parts back. And this time you're going to let yourself fully die by choice. And this time you're going to choose to leave the body as opposed to doing it automatically, unconsciously. And you know what she says at that point? She says, which one? Which head am I? I said, you're supposed to leave through the crown of the head. She says, which head? The one that's rolling down the hill or the energetic one that's still there? She says, I know which one. It's the energetic one. It was really kind of funny. So she leaves through the crown of her head and she looks up and she says, I see light. And she said, I'm going to go to the light. And she goes to the light and she just looks beatific and says, I am the light. That took 30 minutes. I'm going to tell you what happened. Okay, she says, I'm done. People start asking her questions. We're in an amphitheater. She starts turning her neck from side to side. And she says, this is a miracle. This is impossible because I can't move my neck like this. And if I did, I'd be in excruciating pain. I'm not feeling any pain. Then she says, this is really weird. I should be thinking these people want to kill me because, of course, they were the crowd in the French Revolution that was going to like throwing things at her and calling her bloody murder. She says, I'm having a great time with these people. And then she says, I don't feel weighed down. I don't feel helpless and hopeless. I feel a sense of hope. And I can even feel the presence of the divine. And she kept going to these conferences trying to find God, but she could never find God because she didn't think she was a woman who was born in the French Revolution and had her head cut off, right?
Oh my gosh.
And that all changed in 30 minutes. And I know it lasted because she saw me the year after and she came back and found me and said, basically, it all held. And we have some amazing stories like that about chronic pain in our book. The first one is an amazingly interesting story about chronic pain and how someone with a terrible accident, really, that was the reenactment of something that happened 2,000 years ago, which she found. And no one believes this stuff. And it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, because if your chronic back pain goes away, you will not care whether it's literally true and you were reincarnated or it's just an imaginal story that you made up. Who cares? Because your back pain's gone.
Wow, what a story.
What
What a story. That's unbelievable. This is just really fascinating stuff. I mean, I always thought that stress ultimately kills. It's really one of the reasons why I left New York City. I just felt like I was under a tremendous amount of stress and I was probably going to have a heart attack by 45 and that would be the end. So I ended up leaving New York City and now I'm much more relaxed. I'm living in the South. I'm living in Nashville, which is definitely a slower speed, let's say, than New York City. But you believe that a lack of stress is actually shaving years off of my life. Is that correct?
I think that anything that is compulsive shaves years off your life. Now, some people, if they don't have enough, it's like, it's like the three little bears, too
Mhm.
hot, too cold, just right.
Yeah,
If you don't have enough that's inspiring you to aspire to something, you can sit around and you'll have no meaning in your life. So there's an optimal amount of what people call stress, which is different from anxiety, that says, this is what's going to get me up in the morning and get me to do something. Because if you had nothing stressing you out, you just say, well, what's the point? I'll just lay around here and do nothing. And I actually think that can kill people just as much as like putting too much pressure on yourself. So there's an optimum amount. It's true for college students. Like if you don't do anything, I don't care about anything, I'll just lay on the couch, right? Not so good. So you have to find the right amount for you so you're not overwhelmed, but you're not underwhelmed either. And so it's stress gets a bad name, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to anxiety, which just is a trauma structure. But stress is what gets you to go onto the bike when you don't want to, but you say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to ride that bike for the first time, right? That's a
Right.
kind of stress. But you could just say, well, I'm not going to ride the bike, or I'm not going to take the walk, or I'm not going to study for the exam. So there's an optimal amount of stress that gets you developmentally to do what you're to do and leads you to live your passion and your mission and your vision, right? But
Mhm.
too much, you have to go to Nashville.
Yeah. You got to go to Nashville.
And you go to Nashville, which I mean, but if you were a singer songwriter and then you'd have a different kind of stress.
Oh yeah, trying to get on stage as a singer-songwriter in Nashville is next to impossible. There's
Yeah,
just
that's
so
in
many
New York.
talented people, so that's a different level of stress, right?
There you go. You see, context is very important for you. Greek University, it's better to be in the Southeast. Oh, these people, they're just warm, they're friendly until they want to, get on stage, at which point, well, it's kind of like New York. What can I say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast, and I know Massachusetts certainly has some great food to choose from. I mean, you got, some great seafood there. Where do you go locally for a great meal in the Boston area?
Well, my favorite place is a place called Campagna. It's this amazing Italian restaurant. But right across the street from me where I live half time out just outside of Boston in Waltham, which is a food haven of the world.
Right.
But then I live up in Gloucester and Rockport, and Gloucester is the oldest fishing village in the whole country. And right across the street from me is this amazing place that you can get lobster rolls, unlike anything you've seen in the world. So um, can I tell you? And right down the street, there's a place called the Fish Shack, and they serve the most amazing lobster rolls. So depends. If I'm in an Italian mood, I'm in Waltham. But if I'm in a lobster mood, I'm here. So
Yeah,
whatever.
you don't have to ask me twice for a lobster roll. I mean, the answer is always going to be yes, because here in Nashville, you can imagine lobster rolls is not something that's on the menu.
I can imagine. Well, if they are, they're from New England. They've been shipped
Yeah,
out.
if they are, run fast.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
All right. So, if our listeners, if they want to connect with you for training, the life centered therapy training, or if they want to buy the book, it's called The 1 Hour Miracle. How can they connect with you?
Just go to lifecenteredtherapy.com. It's very simple. If they want to get me, I actually answer my own emails. So if they go Hahn, as in Andy Hahn, Hahn at lifecenteredtherapy.com, they can reach me. And all of our training stuff is there. And if they go to Amazon, they can get the book in, Audible, or they can get it Kindle, or they can get, a copy of it. And then if they love it, they could write us a review, which would be great.
There
But
you go. All right. It's lifecenteredtherapy.com. Go and
yeah,
check it out. Andy, thank you so much for sharing all this great information for us. Really it's just fascinating to me. Certainly it's something that's different than I think that what we're all accustomed to, but it certainly makes a lot of sense. And if it works at the end of the day, then hey, that's really all we're looking for. So I appreciate it.
thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And to our audience, if you like this conversation with Dr. Hahn, make sure that you like it. Make sure that you share it on social media. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.